first color you want to create is your skin tone. So there is a base skin color here that you can use, but also I just need to share the original idea of creating skin color. So skin color is made of 3 primary colors plus white, right? So if you do mix blue, yellow, and red, you should get a brown by default. And to make it a little yellowish tone, you're gonna add more yellow than the other two. If the skin is darker, you'll add more blue. And if it's closer to, say, pink and lighter color, you wanna add more red. And of course, you have white, right? So white is gonna be there. Now let's kind of experiment, take a look at your actual pigments, because every paint acts differently. Honestly, if you want to go by theory, you should be able to create a black by mixing the 3 primary, but that doesn't actually happen because none of the pigments are pure enough. But almost 99% of the time you can get some sort of a brown. Let's give it a try. I'm going to start with a clean brush, grabbing some of those colors. I have red here, and you make sure that you wash your brush before you get it started, or actually move on to the next color. That's yellow, and we're gonna have a little bit of blue. Blue is pretty strong, so make sure you are not adding a lot of that. In fact, I mixed those two and white and then add a touch of blue at the end. Okay, so those are the 3, and then I'm gonna need a little bit of white. All right, but before I add the white, let's see what happens. So I'm going to mix in the middle a little bit of those two, a touch of blue, and I can see the yellow is a lot, so I'm bringing in more red now. Let's give this a try and see how it looks. Okay, so that's pretty blue. So blue has been very strong. That means we need to add a little bit more red and more yellow. Let's see if that makes any changes. Yes, definitely we are getting a brown, right? And then, now let's add the white and see what happens to that. Bringing a little bit of white. To that base color that we made is going to create a lighter color. If you want this color move on towards the yellowish tone, you would obviously add more yellow, right? There's like a lot of different skin tone out there, so you want to experiment and see what is the color you are making. And let's have it more like, add more red. It's like that. If I add more white to that base red, it's going to create a lighter skin tone, more like a pinkish color, right? And then if I add more blue, it's going to darken my skin tone. Now I'm going to mix everything here. I don't have enough pigment. Let's test this one. You see, that's pretty dark. I could even add more blue since that's a little too red. Oh, that's purple. You get the idea. So this is how you actually mix different tones of skin color. All right, now that's not good. That's pretty blue. I don't think that is useful. To bring that to balance, I'm gonna need to add more red and yellow to it. Okay, so that's the theory. If I was gonna use this, I'm very happy with those two and these two. I would definitely use them. This is a little too yellow. I need to add a little bit more red to that one. But to make your life a little easier, when I was buying the paint, I kind of looked for a base flesh tone, which is that color. So I'm just gonna start off with that and see if we can make your life a little easier. All right, again, I'm adding that right there. And I'll just apply some of that. Okay, that is a pretty good start. In order to lighten that up, I could either add white or add more water. Let's just add some more water and see if that is satisfying enough. Yes, I do like this one. You know, when you're painting the body, you don't want the color to be very thick because then you're texturizing it and that's more like a fabric. The skin is very it should be more like a transparent fabric if you consider the fabric. Or like just the skin is more less lighter and smoother. A technique you can apply is to wet your space with a very little paint, and then you're gonna dive in with more paint and create your shadows. And then if you want to make it even darker, you add more, right? And then if you want to make that even darker, then you're gonna add in either like a mix of those three to create a brown for your shade. If your base is leaning more towards yellow, to the same base, you're gonna add more yellow, more red, more blue. You got the idea from the previous lesson. But to start off, you can start from here. Actually, let me do a little experiment on that too, so you see the result. But an easy mix would be that you would just add more brown off of your actual set. Use that brown to darken it for shading. Now, if let's try to mix something. I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow. Let's take a look. You see, it's a nice color. It's a good skin tone, and it's leaning more towards yellow. Now, if I grab a little bit of red. Oh, that's too red. I don't think that's a good color at all. I would need to add some white to this, definitely. At least that's what I think. Let's give it a try. Yes, that is very red. But for the sake of experiment, let's add some white to that one and see what happens. Some white. It's becoming very pink, which is cool. That's a nice skin tone. You could use that. Even to that previous one, it's almost becoming orange now. Sorry, yeah, orange. I'm just loosening it up with more water. And it actually is working, not bad. You do the same thing for that yellow, right? Like, you always want to use water to dilute your paint and make it more transparent. And if we add a little bit of blue to that base, see what happens. Good, that was too much. Again, you know, guys, you gotta be very careful. I think I'm rushing, and I don't think this is a nice color for the skin. Of course not. It's completely blue. I failed. Let's start over again. So to that base, if I add just a little bit of blue, see what happens. Just a touch of blue. Yeah, still too blue. So I don't think mixing the blue with that base is compatible. It's good if you were doing it in the previous method where you actually make your skin tone, but to add to that, I would not add blue. And instead, I think I would like to add brown for getting more shade. Let's take a look at our brown. So I think this is that already dried, so I can't really, well, let's give it a try. Usually when you're doing this, you gotta be quick and you go wet and wet. That's dry already, but let me see if I could try to add a little bit of brown for shading. But I want to have a lot of water in this, otherwise it becomes too thick. Okay, that's a good color. Let's give it a try. There you go, that's actually good. Even though that's already dried, it is working. So that's another shade darker. You could add even more brown. And you can make it even darker. So on and so forth. There you go. So here's where you actually test and play with your colors. Once you're ready, you're gonna move on to actual illustration. I prepared 2 drawing, and you'll see in a second why. I like to work with 2 or actually multiple illustration at a time, because in this method you have to wait in between until they're dry. Otherwise they start running into each other. So to start off, I'm gonna do the skin on this one. Based on our experiment, I could really use any of them, but since most of you guys will be starting with that base skin tone, I'm gonna use this. Actually, my hand is pretty full. I'm gonna use that one. Like that is fine. That is fine. These are completely fine, which I normally do. I mix my own, but because you guys are gonna be using that, I think it's a better idea that I use the same thing, so it's less complicated for you guys. I will start with a little bit of that skin base. I add a little bit of water. And for darkening it, I'm gonna use some brown, right? So here we go. I will start by kind of washing my brush. My brush is pretty nice and clean now. I'll go ahead and just wet the area that I want to apply paint. Here's another trick. You don't want to make wet the area that are gonna remain white, because if you do that, the water runs and you lose all the white. So the area that I want to keep light, like as white as paper, I don't apply any water. And I'm gonna consider my light source to be here. I guess maybe I'll just put a little icon there. So here's my light source. That means before I start going ahead with this, I'm gonna keep everything kind of starting from light, gradually darkening it all the way to this side, towards bottom. Okay, so that means I need to keep some of those area dry. And I just apply my water where this is gonna go. And then, first thing, I'm going to use a very watered down version of this paint. I have lots of water in here, pretty liquid. Just a little bit of pigment, not much. And I'm going to apply the paint. As you can see this, the paint is running because it's wet on wet, and automatically the paint is going to sit in certain areas. The area that I kept dry, they're not getting any color. They're remaining white. And towards the end of this illustration, you'll see that we're gonna outline everything in brown for the skin, similar to the clothing where we outline everything in black. For the skin, we outline everything in brown, dark brown. Again, this is fashion illustration, not a realistic painting. There we go. So that's my first wash. And now, while it is wet, I'm gonna quickly go ahead and create my, oh, I forgot the face. Don't forget the face. You gotta do all of this at the same time. I'm gonna go ahead and apply my second color. So this time I'm just using a little heavier paint of the same, so I'm not adding any other color, just heavier paint. And as you can see, because this is again wet on wet, it starts to have some movement naturally. And that's the beauty of working with paint. When they're wet, they actually start to shape some awesome form on their own. You don't really have to work hard. You just need to know where you're placing them, right? That's the part that needs your attention more. There you go. So that's good. You want to move fairly quickly in this stage, because if you go slow, this can dry and it's harder to get that smoothness on the skin. I'll put some shadows on this side of the face. Now I'm ready to do like a harsher, deeper shadow. And for that, I'm not gonna put it everywhere. I would probably put it on the neck because the light source is here and the head is on its way, on the weight of the neck, so it's going to cast some shadow right there. And I'm gonna grab a little bit of brown, mix it with my flesh color. That gives me a little darker tone. I add some water to smooth it out, and let's try this. At first you might think, oh, this is too dark, but it will work, I promise. You also want that sharpness of the color change to convey the dimension. So there you go. And I would also use that color on this side. I see that it's already drawing out on me. So I guess when I work and not teach, I go a little faster as I don't describe things, but I find myself talking at the same time as applying the technique. It slows me down. But that's okay. My point is that when you're doing this, try to concentrate and don't get disturbed, because you have a limited window for your paper to remain wet when you're applying the changes of the color. There. If you like, you could smooth out the edge. In my style, I don't. I'll just keep it the way it is. Alright, I guess one of my lights went out. Gonna turn on the lights. Okay, back to the business. Yeah, as I said, you could lighten this up, you could smooth it out. I usually like to keep it kind of sharp. That's a style that you could pick. You know, you could do the smoother, you could have your lines to remain a little stronger. So now I can't really do anything else until this dries out. That's why I always like to work with 2 or more illustration at a time, so I don't have to waste my time. I'm gonna put this on the side until it dries. I'll get back to it. By the time I finish the skin on this one, the other one should be ready to move on. Same process. I'm going to start with that base color, and it's a good idea to kind of keep that base color clean on your palette. Now I'll show you a little slightly different technique here. Instead of washing my brush completely, I'm going to start with a very light skin tone. And in this case, I believe you're going to consider the light source to be right in the middle, so I can show you how to shade it on the side. If you did watch the shading videos, I did that. Here's the example. It's a good idea to keep that beside your hand, like your basic shadings, and that way it's a good reminder that, okay, for example, this is behind the neck and it's going to be very dark. Here's where the light is in the middle, and you know, different shades. It's a really good idea to plan that ahead of time. And in this case, since I did a little video on that, I have it ready. So it's a good idea to keep this side by side as I progress through this. Okay, so let's just start with the skin tone. The light is in the middle. That means that the part in the middle is going to remain really light. Everything on either side are getting darker as we go through. So here it's a little darker. Same thing with the arms. Now, as you can see, I didn't start off with water. I have a light color when I'm doing this. It's a slightly different. And now I think the face is pretty dark, so I'm going to remove some of those pigments there. I like this a little better. It was too dark for me. And now I go ahead and do the same thing to my legs. And as you can see, this is an interesting project because you get to see how to do the body, and then on top of that you're gonna go back and do the sheer fabric. I pretty much outline my legs. Because the light is at the top, it's going to cast some shadow right underneath this fabric. So I can easily do some extra shadow right there. This is my first tone. Now I'm going to add more water to my brush and apply that right on the edge. This is a slightly different technique. I'm just smoothing out the edge, making them a little lighter. I mean, the top part is pretty narrow. I don't have a lot of room. And if I apply a lot, I may kill all the white, so I'll kind of leave that alone. Maybe on this side I can add. To do the shade, just compare it with this one. Here I added brown, so it's pretty dark. This is a little lighter. I could leave it as that, or if I want to get a little more shadow, I'll just grab a little bit of that brown mix with my skin tone that I made previously and apply to the dark areas. Definitely under the chin. It's going to cast some shadow coming down on either side. On the shoulder, maybe here. Another good practice would be you actually find a picture on internet and use that reference paper for your light and shadow. Since I kind of came up with all of this, I don't have a real reference to use. I guess I did that a long time ago when I was learning how to do this. I don't do that anymore. It's still a good idea. Sometimes if I want to do painting which are closer to realistic, I will reference to an image, and that will tell you how to actually shade the darker areas and light areas. It's right in front of you, you can see it. At the moment, I'm just imagining when the light is at the top and in the middle, this is what I'm gonna get. And here I'm going to apply that dark shade. Continuing down on one side and on the other side. And I think this is good enough. I could let this dry before I get back to it. And again, as before described, I'm leaving white of the paper in some areas, and that's super important. Another thing I could probably color, because the hair is not really on the way, I could apply a little bit of color to the hair, and I want my the hair to be brown. I already have some brown mixed here. I'll make it really, really light. Don't make it heavy. This is just the wash behind the back, and when it dries, you're gonna come back with really fine brush and create your hairlines. For now, I'm just suggesting the color of the hair, just a general. Again, keep some white in there. I could apply a little darker areas, but don't make it too dark, because if you do, it's hard to create the texture of the hair. All right, so that's good enough. I have to wait until this dries before I can proceed with anything else. Now I'm gonna go back, check out the previous one. Hopefully that one is ready to continue. Yeah, that's dry. Let's move on. So before I start coloring the clothes, I think I can do the hair. This part of the face is dry, so I think I'm good to go. I want to make her hair also brown, so I'll just apply some of that brown that I had on my brush. If you think that's too dark, you could always remove some of the paint. So remember, this is gonna be just some, it's a basic wash underneath, and we'll come back to do the detail work on that. Maybe I'll just add a little bit of darker tone right there. Yeah, that should be good enough. All right, so this part is dry, and I believe I planned this to be in purple. We're going to, again, imagine where the lights and shadows are gonna go. I somehow planned that when I was sketching this, so the light is gonna be here. All of those spots are going to be my white. So here's a big white that I want to keep. I assume I'm gonna have some big white on the big folds there. So you can actually, let me show you. Make sure you're not putting this on a wet surface. So here, I know I'm gonna keep that section white. It's a good idea to draw them ahead of time, since you're beginning this and you don't have a lot of experience. So it's a good idea to have some guideline. I don't put them any longer, but you know, I find that they make it very dirty. So that's why I try to memorize areas. That makes it a little faster. I will continue coloring this in the next video. So let's take a short break and I'll come back.